1 year had passed since humanity left Earth. In the old galaxy, everything had changed. The Galactic Assembly still met on Valaris Prime, but the chamber felt empty now. Fewer delegates attended each session. Old alliances had crumbled. The unity that had lasted for 12,000 years was gone. High Speaker Zethron had been removed from his position. The Kovathi blamed him for the disaster, and they needed someone to punish. He lived now in quiet exile on a distant moon, watching the news and understanding that he had destroyed more than his own career. He had destroyed an era. The Kovathi economy never recovered. The trade routes through Sol remained closed. Earth's defense grid destroyed any ship that tried to pass. Other routes existed, but they were longer and more expensive. One by one, Kovathi trading companies collapsed. The great houses that had ruled for millennia began to crumble. Other species suffered as well. The interconnected economy of the Assembly had depended on trust and cooperation. Now both were gone. Species hoarded resources. They broke contracts. They fought over scraps of territory that would have been worthless a year ago, and beyond the dark matter barrier. Humanity grew stronger every day. The 3 worlds of the new Sol system had become a true civilization. Cities covered hope. Factories and research centers filled promise. Dawn had become a military stronghold, home to the fleet that protected humanity's new home. But the new Sol system was no longer alone. Ambassador Daniel Grant stood in his office overlooking New Geneva. On his desk were reports from across what humans had begun calling the Free Territories. 12 star systems now. 47 worlds. 200 billion people. And that number grew daily. Not all of them were human. The species that the Assembly had exploited for millennia had found a new home with humanity. The Kindori, whose world the Kovathi had stripped mined and abandoned. The Velith, who had been enslaved by the Drekari for 3,000 years. The Solari, whose peaceful nature had made them targets for every aggressive species in the galaxy. They had all come seeking refuge. They had all been welcomed. Grant reviewed the latest immigration numbers. Another 1 million beings had crossed into free territory space this month. They came in small ships and large convoys. They came alone and in family groups. They came because they had heard that humanity offered something the Assembly never had. Equality. In the free territories, no species was considered superior or inferior. No one was mocked for their biology or their history. Every being was judged by their actions, not their origins. It was a simple idea. It should not have been revolutionary. But in a galaxy that had spent 12,000 years building hierarchies of power and contempt, it was the most radical thing anyone had ever proposed. A knock at his door interrupted Grant's thoughts. His assistant entered with a message. The Assembly wanted to talk. Grant was not surprised. The delegations that had visited last year had returned to the old galaxy with stories of human power and prosperity. Those stories had spread. Now the species that had mocked humanity wanted to reconsider. He agreed to meet their representatives. But not on Valaris Prime, not in the chamber where humanity had been humiliated. They would meet here in New Geneva, in the heart of the civilization that should not exist. A week later, the Assembly delegation arrived. It was the largest diplomatic mission in galactic history. Representatives from all 47 species. Even the Kovathi, represented now by a younger, more humble speaker. Grant met them in the same receiving hall where he had faced their scouts a year ago. But now the hall was surrounded by a city of 10 million. Now human ships filled the skies. Now the balance of power had shifted completely. The new Kovathi speaker stepped forward. Her name was Therena, and she had been a junior diplomat when Zethron ruled. She had watched the mockery of humanity and felt shame. Now she spoke for her people. She offered apologies. She offered trade agreements. She offered partnership. Grant listened politely. Then he asked a question. "Why now?" Trina hesitated. She looked at the other delegates. They all knew the answer, but none of them wanted to say it. Grant said it for them. "You come because you are weak and we are strong. A year ago, you laughed at us. Now you fear us. You do not want partnership. You want protection." The chamber fell silent. Grant walked among the alien delegates. He was just one human, smaller and shorter-lived than most of them. But he carried the weight of 17 billion people who had crossed the stars rather than accept disrespect. Humanity would not take revenge, he said. That was not their way. They would not attack the assembly or conquer its worlds. They would not enslave its people or steal its resources. But they would also not forget. The species that had mocked humanity would have to earn trust through actions, not words. They would have to prove that they had changed. Until then, they would remain outside the free territories, watching as the civilization they had dismissed grew more powerful every day. Some delegates protested. Others pleaded. But Grant's decision was final. The assembly had made its choice a year ago. Now, they would live with the consequences. As the delegation prepared to leave, Grant walked out onto the balcony of the receiving hall. Below him, the city of New Geneva spread out in all directions. Humans and aliens walked together through streets lined with trees from a dozen worlds. Children played in parks, their laughter rising into the warm air. Secretary Santos joined him, as she often did at moments like this. She was older now, but her eyes still held the same determination that had guided humanity through its greatest trial. "Do you think they will change?" she asked. Grant watched a group of young beings, human and alien together, running towards some game only they understood. Sophie was among them, taller now, her smile bright under the new sun. "Some will," he said. "Some will understand that the old ways are dead. They will join us, and they will be welcome. Others will cling to their pride until it destroys them." Santos nodded. "And Earth?" Grant thought about the blue world they had left behind. The defense grids still protected it. The automated system still maintained its cities and monuments. It waited, empty and silent, for the day when humans might return. "Earth will always be our home," he said. "But home is not just a place. It is the people you love. It is the dreams you share. It is the future you build together." He looked at the city below, at the ships in the sky, at the stars that had once seemed so far away and now belonged to humanity. "They mocked us," he said. "They told us we were nothing. By dawn we were gone." He smiled. "But we did not disappear. We became something they never imagined. And now, the future belongs to us." The sun set over New Geneva. Across the free territories, billions of beings prepared for the night. Some were human. Many were not. All of them shared a vision of what the galaxy could become. In the old assembly, fear and confusion reigned. The order they had built over 12,000 years was crumbling. The species they had dismissed were rising, and somewhere in the endless dark, the light of humanity burned brighter than it ever had before. The mockery had been the greatest gift the galaxy ever gave them. It had set them free, and in their freedom, they had found their true strength, not in weapons or technology, not in power or conquest, but in the simple truth that every being deserves dignity. That was the lesson humanity taught the stars, and the stars would never forget. 3 months passed in the galaxy. For the Galactic Assembly, it was a time of fear and confusion. For humanity, it was a time of building. The Ark fleet had traveled far beyond the edges of known space. They had crossed regions that alien maps marked as empty. They had passed through a natural barrier of dark matter that blocked all sensors from outside. And on the other side, they had found paradise. 3 habitable worlds orbited a stable yellow star. The system was rich with resources. asteroid belts full of metals, gas giants that could provide fuel for centuries, moons that could be shaped into colonies. Everything humanity needed to start again was waiting for them. Admiral Shaw had named the star New Sol. The three worlds became Hope, Promise, and Dawn. Within days of arrival, the colonization had begun. Human efficiency, hidden from the galaxy for so long, now showed its true face. Prefabricated structures rose from the soil of Hope. Factories assembled themselves on Promise. Mining operations began on Dawn and in the asteroid belts. The fleet that had carried humanity across the stars became orbital stations and defense platforms. Ambassador Daniel Grant walked through the streets of the first city on Hope. The buildings were simple but solid. Gardens had already been planted. Children ran through open spaces, laughing under an alien sun. He stopped at a construction site where workers were raising a monument. It would show Earth as seen from space, the blue marble that had been humanity's home. Beneath it would be carved the names of everyone who had been left behind in graves on the old world. A woman approached him. Secretary General Maria Santos had aged 10 years in 3 months. The weight of leading humanity through its greatest trial had taken its toll. But her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still strong. She stood beside Grant and watched the construction. "We have lost so much," she said. Grant nodded. "But we have saved more." Around them, the city grew. In orbit, ships patrolled against threats that might never come. Across the three worlds, 17 billion humans built new lives. They had left behind everything familiar. They had brought with them everything that mattered. Back in the galaxy, the assembly continued to crumble. High Speaker Zethran had lost much of his power. The Kovathi blamed him for the disaster. He had mocked the humans. He had given them reason to leave. He had not suspected their true capabilities. The trade routes through Sol remained blocked. Earth's defense grid destroyed any ship that approached. The Kovathi economy collapsed further each day. Other species that depended on those routes suffered as well. Worse than the economic damage was the fear. If humans had hidden such technology for 50 years, what else might other species be hiding? Trust between assembly members began to break down. Old allies looked at each other with new suspicion. The Velocians withdrew into their crystal cities. The Drekari strengthened their borders. The Morphids stopped sharing information. The unity that had held the galaxy together for 12,000 years was falling apart, and everyone wanted to know where the humans had gone. Search parties scoured the galaxy. They checked every system, every nebula, every dark corner of space. They found nothing. Humanity had vanished completely. Some species began to hope that the humans were gone forever. Perhaps they had flown into some unknown danger. Perhaps their advanced technology had failed them. Perhaps they were dead. Those hopes died on the 93rd day. Every communication system in the assembly received the same transmission at the same moment. The technology required to send such a message was beyond anything the galaxy possessed. It demonstrated power that made the assembly's greatest achievements look like children's games. The message contained two things. First, a star chart showing a region of space that no alien map included. Second, an invitation. Zethran stared at the message on his private screen. His 4 hands shook. The humans were not dead. They had not been destroyed. They were alive, and they were inviting the galaxy to visit. Some species wanted to refuse. The Kovathi Council debated for days. Many feared a trap. Others feared the unknown. But eventually, curiosity won. Diplomatic vessels were prepared. The Velocians sent a small delegation. The Drekari sent observers. Even the Morphids, who rarely traveled beyond their own space, dispatched a single representative. The journey took weeks. The alien ships crossed into regions they had never explored. They passed through the dark matter barrier and emerged in a system that made their sensors sing with data. What they found changed everything they believed about humanity. 3 worlds, all of them alive with activity. Cities that had risen in just 3 months. Orbital stations that dwarfed anything in assembly space. Ships that moved with grace and power beyond imagination. A civilization that had not just survived its exodus but thrived. The alien delegations were escorted to the capital city on hope. They passed through streets filled with humans going about their daily lives. They saw schools and hospitals, parks and theaters, all the infrastructure of a mature civilization, built in less than 100 days. And they saw something else that shocked them even more. Humans were not alone. Walking among the human crowds were members of other species. Some the aliens recognized. Others they had never seen before. These were beings from the far edges of the galaxy, species that the Assembly had exploited or ignored for thousands of years. They had heard about humanity's departure. They had heard about the new civilization beyond the barrier. And they had come seeking a different kind of future. Ambassador Grant met the alien delegations in a receiving hall larger than the assembly chamber on Valaris Prime. He wore simple clothes and spoke in a calm voice. But his message carried weight that made the massive Dreckery observer step back. Humanity had not fled in fear. Grant explained. Humanity had relocated with purpose. They had built their own space, their own civilization, their own future. And now they were ready to engage with the galaxy again. But on their terms, Grant looked at the Velocian delegate. He remembered how this species had called humans mayflies. He remembered the crystal laughter that had echoed through the assembly chamber. Humanity would trade with species that treated them as equals, he said. They would defend those who could not defend themselves. They would welcome anyone who came in good faith, but they would remember. They would remember who had mocked them. They would remember who had threatened them. They would remember who had shown respect and who had shown contempt. The Velocian delegate asked about trade agreements with the Corvati. Grant politely refused. The Dreckery observer requested technology exchanges. Grant said they would have to wait. The message was clear. Humanity held the power now, and they would use it as they chose. As the alien ships prepared to depart, carrying news that would reshape galactic politics forever, Grant stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting over New Geneva, painting the sky in colors that no human had ever seen before. Secretary Santos joined him. She looked out at the city they had built. What happens now? She asked. Grant watched a group of children playing in a park below. Among them was Sophie, the girl who had nearly been left behind. She was laughing with friends that included young beings from 3 different species. Now we show them who we really are, Grant said. The alien delegations left. They carried word back to the assembly. The humans had not disappeared. They had evolved. And they were building something that the galaxy had never seen before. Morning light filled the assembly chamber on Valaris Prime. The great windows opened to let in the warmth of the station's artificial sun. Delegates gathered in small groups, drinking their morning beverages and discussing the day's business. The mood was light. Yesterday's entertainment with the humans had put everyone in good spirits. High Speaker Zethrin arrived late, as befitted his status. He acknowledged greetings from lesser delegates with small nods of his gray head. He took his seat and prepared for another routine day of galactic politics. Then the first report. ARRIVEDA Corvathi trading vessel had passed through the Sol system during the night. This was normal. The route between Corvathi space and the outer colonies passed near Earth. The captain had expected to see the usual chatter of human communications, the busy signals of a primitive but energetic civilization. Instead, he found silence. No radio transmissions, no energy signatures from cities, no heat from power plants, no movement of spacecraft, nothing. The captain assumed his sensors were malfunctioning. He ran diagnostics. Everything worked perfectly. He scanned again. Still nothing. Earth was dark. Zethran received the report with confusion. Perhaps the humans were having some kind of global power failure. Perhaps they were mourning their rejection. He ordered the captain to investigate more closely. The trading vessel entered orbit around Earth. What? The captain reported next sent ice through Zethran's ancient veins. The planet was empty. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply empty. Cities stood intact but powerless. Vehicles sat in their parking spaces. Homes were locked and undisturbed. But there were no life signs anywhere on the surface. 17 billion human beings had vanished. The news spread through the assembly like fire through dry grass. Delegates rushed to communication terminals. They demanded confirmation. They ordered their own ships to investigate. But every report came back the same. Humanity was gone. Zethran called an emergency session of the assembly. The great chamber that had echoed with laughter just hours ago now hummed with fear. How was this possible? Where had they gone? What technology allowed such a thing? The Velocian Science Council analyzed the sensor data. Their conclusions were disturbing. The evacuation had been organized, methodical. There was no sign of panic or haste. Power plants had been shut down in proper sequence. Industrial facilities had been deactivated according to safety protocols. Even waste systems had been properly closed. This was not a disaster. This was a plan. A Drekari admiral spoke up. His species was known for military analysis. He had studied the reports carefully. His conclusion was simple and terrifying. The humans had prepared for this, possibly for decades. They had built ships and facilities that no one had ever detected. They had trained their entire population for coordinated evacuation. They had hidden their true capabilities from every alien observer. The Drekari admiral looked around the chamber. His heavy voice carried clearly. "We have been watching them for 50 years, he said. "We thought we knew everything about them. We knew nothing." Panic began to spread. If humans could hide an evacuation fleet, what else had they hidden? If they could move 17 billion people in a single night, what else could they do? Then the scout ships reached Earth's defense perimeter. No one had known it existed. Thousands of weapons platforms orbited the planet in perfect formation. They had been invisible until now, hidden by technology that bent light and fooled sensors. But when alien vessels approached, they revealed themselves. Warning messages broadcast in 100 languages. The message was simple. Earth was now sovereign territory. Approach would be considered hostile. Any vessel that crossed the perimeter would be destroyed. A Korvathi cruiser ignored the warning. Its captain was arrogant. He believed that primitive human technology could not threaten a warship of his people. He was wrong. The weapons platforms fired. The Korvathi cruiser ceased to exist. It was not damaged or disabled. It was simply erased from space. One moment it was there. The next moment it was atoms scattered across the void. The assembly watched in horror. They analyzed the weapon's fire. They measured the energy output. They calculated the destructive potential. The Velocian Science Council delivered its verdict. The technology behind Earth's defenses was at least 3 generations ahead of anything in the galactic database. The weapons used principles that assembly scientists did not fully understand. The shields protecting the platforms were impenetrable by known means. Humans had never been primitive. They had been hiding. Zethran sat in his chair, his 4 hands trembling. He thought about the presentation Daniel Grant had given. The humble images of Earth, the careful demonstrations of basic technology, the polite requests for acceptance. All of it had been a performance. All of it had been designed to make the assembly underestimate humanity. But why? The answer came from an unlikely source. A young Morphid analyst had been studying human culture for years. She understood things about humanity that older beings had missed. Humans were not aggressive, she explained. They did not want war, but they learned from their own history that weakness invited attack. So they hid their strength. They watched. They waited. They prepared for the day when others would show their true intentions. Yesterday, the assembly had shown its intentions clearly. It had mocked humanity. It had threatened humanity. It had made clear that Earth would never be treated as an equal dot, so humanity had left. Zethran ordered a search. Find the humans. Track their ships. Discover where they had gone. But the Ark fleet had vanished into the depths of space. Their drives left no trail. Their ships were invisible to every sensor. They had traveled to a destination that no alien map showed, a region of space hidden by natural phenomena that blocked all detection. The search parties found nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. The assembly descended into chaos. Trade routes that passed near Sol were now blocked by Earth's defense grid. The Golvathi economy, which depended on those routes, began to collapse. Other species demanded compensation. Old alliances strained and cracked dot, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, 17 billion humans traveled toward their new home. On the bridge of the New Horizon, Admiral Shaw watched the stars stream past. Beside him, Ambassador Daniel Grant stood in silence. They had left everything behind. Their world. Their history. The graves of everyone they had ever loved, but they had also escaped. They had broken free from a galaxy that would never accept them. They had chosen their own destiny. Grant thought about the assembly. He wondered how long it would take them to understand what had really happened. He wondered if they would ever realize that the mockery they had delivered was not a victory, but a gift. They had given humanity the excuse it needed to leave. They had freed humanity from the burden of trying to belong. Shaw spoke quietly. Any regrets? Grant shook his head. None. The fleet sailed on through the endless dark. Ahead of them lay new worlds, new possibilities, a future that belonged to humanity alone. Behind them, the galaxy burned with questions that would never be answered. The news spread across Earth in minutes. Every screen on the planet showed the same images. Alien delegates laughing. Human dignity trampled. A species rejected by the galaxy it had hoped to join. But something strange happened. Instead of anger or despair, a cold calm settled over humanity. People stopped what they were doing. They looked at their families, their friends, their neighbors. They nodded to each other without speaking. They knew what was coming. They had always known. In Geneva, the United Nations Emergency Council gathered in a chamber deep underground. The room had been built 50 years ago, carved into the bedrock beneath the Alps. Only a handful of people knew it existed. Tonight, it was full. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the head of the long table. She was a small woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had led humanity through first contact, through the difficult years of learning that Earth was not alone, through the slow realization that the galaxy was not a friendly place. She looked at the faces around her. Presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, scientists. Every major nation was represented. Every leader who mattered was present. She spoke simply. It is time. No one argued. No one asked questions. They had prepared for this moment for 4 decades. They had hoped it would never come. But they had prepared. Project Exodus. The name had been chosen carefully. Exodus meant departure. It meant leaving behind the old and walking toward the new. It meant freedom. For 40 years, humanity had built in secret. While alien observers watched Earth's surface, humans dug deeper. They constructed facilities beneath oceans and inside mountains. They hollowed out asteroids and built stations on the dark side of the moon. They developed technology that they never revealed to the galaxy. The aliens thought humans were primitive. They thought Earth's fusion reactors were the best humanity could manage. They thought human ships were slow and weak. They were wrong. On the far side of Luna, Admiral Kevin Shaw walked through the corridors of Prometheus Base. The facility stretched for kilometers beneath the lunar surface. It had taken 30 years to build, working only during the hours when alien satellites could not see the moon's dark side. And inside Prometheus Base, the Ark fleet waited. 200 ships. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever launched publicly. Each one carried technology that would make the Assembly's proudest vessels look like toys. Faster than light drives that bent space itself. Shields that could withstand the heart of a star. Weapons that could crack a planet in half. Humanity had never been primitive. They had simply been careful. Shaw walked onto the command bridge of the lead ship, the New Horizon. Around him, officers took their positions. Screens flickered to life. Systems that had slept for years awakened. He gave the order. Wake them all. One by one, the ships of the Ark fleet powered up. Their engines glowed with energy that alien physics said was impossible. Their hulls shimmered with defensive fields that no scanner could penetrate. They were beautiful and terrible, and they represented everything humanity had hidden from the galaxy. In the asteroid belt, Dr. Nathan Cole supervised a different kind of preparation. His facility held no weapons. Instead, it contained the essence of human civilization. Genetic samples from every species on Earth. Seeds from every plant. Recordings of every piece of music ever written. Copies of every book, every painting, every film. The complete history and culture of humanity, preserved in formats that would last for millions of years. Cole watched as robots loaded the final containers on the transport ships. He thought about everything they were leaving behind. The pyramids, the Great Wall, the cities that had taken centuries to build, the graves of everyone who had ever lived and died on Earth. But he also thought about everything they were taking with them. The laughter of children, the love between families, the dreams of a species that refused to die. On the surface of Earth, the evacuation began. There was no panic. Every human on the planet had trained for this. From childhood, they had learned the routes to their assigned departure points. They had practiced the procedures. They had said their silent goodbyes to the places they might never see again. Families gathered at designated sites. In New York and Tokyo, in Cairo and Sydney, in small villages and great cities, people formed orderly lines. Underground transit systems, secretly expanded over decades, carried millions to hidden launch facilities. In Houston, Flight Coordinator Grace Miller managed the departure of 300 vessels from the Gulf facility alone. Her voice remained steady as she guided ship after ship into the sky. She watched her husband and children board Transport 247. She did not cry. There would be time for reunion later, or there would not. Either way, the mission came first. Across the planet, similar scenes unfolded. Mothers kissed their children and put them on ships. Fathers saluted and returned to their posts. Old people who had waited their whole lives for this moment finally saw their purpose fulfilled. On Velaris Station, Daniel Grant played his role perfectly. He wandered the corridors with slumped shoulders. He sat alone in observation lounges, staring at the stars. He let alien delegates see him and pity him. The poor human, rejected by the galaxy. The primitive creature who had dared to dream of equality. None of them suspected the truth. None of them knew that 8 light years away, 17 billion people were leaving their home forever. A Velocian delegate approached Daniel near midnight. The crystal being seemed almost sympathetic. It said that perhaps in 1,000 years, humans might evolve enough to try again. Daniel smiled sadly. He thanked the Velocian for its kindness. He said he hoped the future would be better. The Velocian glided away, satisfied with its gesture of mercy. Daniel checked his communicator. Phase 2 was complete. The Ark fleet had departed. The transport ships had reached their rally point. Earth was nearly empty. He thought about the world he was leaving behind. The house where he had grown up. The school where he had learned to read. The ocean where he had first fallen in love. All of it would soon be a memory. The memories could be carried to new worlds. Homes could be built again. Children could play under different suns. Humanity was not dying. It was moving. The hours passed. The final transports lifted from Earth. Automated systems took control of the planet's infrastructure. Power plants shut down in sequence. Factories went silent. Cities fell dark. The last ship to leave carried a single young passenger. A girl named Sophie, who had been left behind when a transport malfunctioned. A rescue team had risked everything to retrieve her. They had delayed the entire operation by 47 minutes to save one child, because that was what humans did. They never left anyone behind. As Sophie's ship broke through the atmosphere, she pressed her hand against the window. Below her, Earth grew smaller and smaller. The blue marble that had been humanity's home for 200,000 years shrank to the size of a coin. Then a dot, then nothing at all. Dawn was coming to Valaris Prime, and Earth was silent. The great chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched wider than any building on Earth. Lights from 1,000 worlds glowed along the curved walls. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each one shaped to fit their unique bodies. Some breathed oxygen. Others required methane or nitrogen. The assembly had existed for 12,000 years, and in all that time, it had never welcomed a species as young as humanity. Ambassador Daniel Grant stood at the central podium. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had spent 30 years in diplomacy, first on Earth and then among the stars. He knew how to read a room. And right now, this room was not friendly. He activated the holographic display and began his presentation. Images of Earth appeared above him. Blue oceans, green forests, cities that sparkled at night. He spoke about human history, about their journey from caves to spacecraft in just 10,000 years. He talked about their art, their music, their desire for peace and cooperation. The Korvathi delegation sat directly across from him. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms. Their leader, High Speaker Zethran, watched with narrow eyes. His mouth curved in what might have been amusement or disgust. It was hard to tell with Korvathi. Daniel continued. He explained that humanity wanted to join the Interstellar Commerce Pact. They wanted to trade, to learn, to grow alongside the older species of the galaxy. Earth had much to offer. Their artists created beauty that moved the soul. Their scientists solved problems in unexpected ways. Their people worked hard and dreamed big. When he finished, silence filled the chamber. Then Zethran rose from his seat. The High Speaker was ancient by Korvathi standards. He had served in the assembly for 300 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched civilizations crumble to dust. To him, humanity was nothing special. Just another brief flash of light in the endless darkness of space. He began to laugh. The sound echoed through the chamber. Other delegates looked at each other in confusion at first. Then they saw what Zethran was pointing at. He had taken control of the holographic display. New images appeared. Human cities, but now shown next to the great constructions of older species. Earth technology compared to Korvathi machines. Human lifespans measured against species that lived for thousands of years. The message was clear. Humans were small. Humans were weak. Humans were primitive. Other delegates began to laugh as well. The Velocians, beings of living crystal, made sounds like breaking glass. The Drekari, massive creatures with armored shells, rumbled with deep amusement. Even the usually silent Morphids rippled with what passed for laughter among their kind. Daniel stood perfectly still. His face showed nothing, but his hands, hidden behind the podium, were clenched into fists. Zeta Rand spoke in the common tongue of the assembly. His words were translated into 100 languages and broadcast across the galaxy. He called humans mayflies with ambition. He said they were children playing at being adults. He suggested that perhaps in another 1,000,000 years, when they had evolved past their violent instincts and learned to control their emotions, they might be ready to join civilized society. The Drekari ambassador added his own insult. He said humans should be grateful that stronger species had not simply taken their planet. Earth had resources, good metals, clean water. The only reason it remained untouched was because no one considered it worth the effort. The Velocian delegate suggested that humans be classified as a protected species, like the simple creatures that lived in nature preserves undeveloped worlds. Let them have their little planet. Let them think they were important. But keep them away from real civilization. For 3 hours, the mockery continued. Every aspect of human culture was examined and found lacking. Their music was called noise. Their art was called primitive scratching. Their literature was dismissed as the ramblings of creatures who would be dead before they could develop any wisdom. Daniel said nothing. He simply watched and listened. And far away, on Earth, others watched and listened as well. In the command center of United Nations Space Command, Secretary of Defense Laura Patterson sat in silence. Beside her, Admiral Kevin Shaw gripped the arms of his chair so hard that the metal bent under his fingers. Around them, hundreds of officers and officials witnessed every insult, every laugh, every dismissive gesture. No one spoke. No one needed to. They all understood what was happening. The galaxy had made its judgment. Humanity was not welcome. When the vote came, it was unanimous. All 47 species rejected Earth's application. Not a single delegate spoke in humanity's defense. The motion was recorded and filed. The matter was considered closed. Zethran turned to Daniel one last time. The High Speaker's expression was almost kind, the way someone might look at a pet that had tried to do a trick and failed. He said that humans should count themselves lucky. The assembly was merciful. It allowed primitive species to continue existing in their little corners of the galaxy. As long as humans stayed on their world and did not cause trouble, they would be left alone. But if they ever tried to expand beyond their solar system without permission, if they ever thought themselves equal to the great species of the galaxy, they would learn the true meaning of power. Daniel looked at the High Speaker for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but every being in the chamber heard him clearly. He said 5 words. "You will regret this day." Zethran laughed again. So did the other delegates. The idea that these short-lived, soft-skinned, emotional creatures could ever make the Golvathi regret anything was the funniest thing they had heard in centuries. Daniel requested permission to remain on the station until morning to complete departure documents. This was standard procedure for rejected applicants. Zethran granted the request with a wave of one of his 4 hands. Let the human have his night of shame. By morning, he would slink back to his little world and never bother the assembly again. As Daniel walked out of the chamber, the laughter followed him. He passed through corridors filled with aliens who pointed and whispered. He returned to his small quarters and closed the door behind him. Then he allowed himself to smile. He activated a secure communication channel. A moment later, the face of Secretary Patterson appeared on his screen. Her expression was hard as stone. She asked one question. "Is it done?" Daniel nodded. They took the bait. They think we are nothing. Patterson leaned forward. Good. Begin Phase 1. Across Earth. In hidden bunkers and secret facilities, lights began to turn on. Machines that had waited for decades hummed to life. People who had trained their entire lives for this moment received their orders. The galaxy had laughed at humanity. But humanity had been preparing for this night since the day they first made contact with alien life. They had hoped for peace. They had planned for rejection. Now those plans would unfold in the assembly chamber. The delegates celebrated their easy victory. They had no idea that in just a few hours, everything would change. They had no idea that the primitive creatures they had mocked possessed secrets that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Dawn was coming. And when it arrived, the galaxy would discover that it had made a terrible mistake. The clock began to count down.